All right, Algebra 2. We're going to go into day 2 of long division with polynomials. So there's going to be really kind of 3 things we're going to focus on. One will be a little bit of review. 2, we're going to get into remainders. And then 3, what happens when you have missing terms. So if you didn't exactly understand day 1, we are going to go ahead and review a little bit and then build a little bit as well. All right, so number 1 would be a review problem. This is a polynomial being divided by a monomial. As the note said yesterday, basically in this particular case, what you do is take each term of the polynomial and divide it up by the monomial and reduce. But you have to identify that case, because your other cases where you're dividing a polynomial by a binomial, that's when you actually get to go into long division. We're still dividing, but we're not doing long division. So 4 divided by 4 is going to give you 1. K to the 5th over k squared is k cubed, plus 8 divided by 4 is 2. K to the 4th over k squared is k squared, plus 4 divided by 4 is 1. And again, you don't have to write the 1. And then k cubed over k squared is going to give you k. So if you attempted the homework yesterday, you already knew how to do that one. And again, if it's a polynomial divided by a monomial, you're just splitting it up and then reducing. Now, when you get into a problem like number 4, okay, one of the things that you should be looking for throughout the polynomial is missing terms, meaning, okay, does it go 3, 2, 1, nothing? So we're good to go here. We don't have anything missing. So then you can go right into your long division process. So you got x plus 4, and then we're going to take the x cubed minus 4x squared minus 40x minus 32. And remember, like I was saying yesterday, you're going to start one term back, and then what times x gives you x cubed? What times x gives you x cubed? Well, that's going to be x squared. So you have x squared times x cubed, or x squared times x gives you x cubed. X squared times 4 gives you a positive 4x squared. And then when you subtract, okay, remember it changes the signs on both. So that's going to be a minus, and it's also going to be a minus here. So if you're doing it properly, your x cubes are going to drop. A negative 4x squared minus 4x squared is going to give you a negative 8x squared. And then we bring down the negative 40x. And then what times x gives you negative 8x squared? What times x gives you negative 8x squared? Well, that's going to be a negative 8x. So negative 8x times x gives you a negative 8x squared. A negative 8x times 4 gives you a negative 32x. And then again, when you go to subtract, that's basically going to change the signs on both those. And you know you're on the right part when that first part drops out. And then negative 40x plus 32x is going to give you a negative 8x. And then we bring down the negative 32. So then the last part here is what times x gives you a negative 8x? What times x gives you a negative 8x? Well, a negative 8. So negative 8 times x gives you a negative 8x. A negative 8 times 4 gives you a negative 32. And then when you subtract, it's going to change that to a plus and change that to a plus. And then what ends up happening is our 8x and our 32's drop out and we get 0. So that's going to tell you you have no remainder, which I mentioned yesterday. And then your answer, your quotient, is the technical name for it, is this. Okay? All right. So now we look at number 5. So again, you should always begin each problem. Is it going in decreasing order or descending order without any missing terms? So I got a 3, a 2, a 1, a 0. I'm good to go. And then I can begin dividing. So I have my n minus 10, and then my n cubed, my minus 8n squared, minus 16n, minus 35, and then you can begin that process of dividing. So again, you start one term back. What times n gives you n cubed? What times n gives you n cubed? Well, that's going to be n squared. So n squared times n is n cubed. N squared times a negative 10 is a negative 10n squared. Then we subtract. And again, yesterday I kind of went through and explained to you that technically you're distributing that negative sign in. So you got the n cubes drop. A negative 8n squared plus 10n squared gives you 2n squared. And we bring down the negative 16n. And then what times n gives you 2n squared? What times n gives you 2n squared? Well, it's going to be a positive 2n. So 2n times n gives you 2n squared. 2n times a negative 10 gives you a negative 20n. And then the same thing, we subtract. It's going to change that to a plus sign. And then what should happen again is this drops out, and then a negative 16n plus 20n is going to give you a 4n. And then we got to bring down the negative 35. So what times n gives you 4n? What times n gives you 4n? Positive 4. So 4 times n is 4n. 4 times the negative 10 is a negative 40. We have to remember to subtract. Okay, so that's going to change the signs. Our 4n's drop. And then a negative 35 plus 40 gives us a positive 5. So now we have a remainder. Okay, there's nothing left to do with this one than to learn how to write your answer when you have a remainder. Okay, so you're going to still use the part from up top, the n squared plus 2n plus 4, and then we take our remainder plus 5 over what we were dividing by, which was n minus 2. Okay, so the process of the long division is the same. It's just when you have a remainder, you just got to remember to toss it on at the end like I did. All right. So I don't like number 8 or even number 7. So I end up making up my own examples to kind of get the missing terms idea across to you. So we have a cubed plus 8a minus 24 divided by quantity a minus 2. All right, so unlike the previous examples, when we go to check for missing terms, we have a 3, but we're missing the a squared. Okay, so when you go to write your division problem, you got a minus 2 still out in front of there. We have a cubed, and then we got to fill in for it. So we're going to write in plus 0a squared because it's missing. Then we have our 8a, and then minus 24. So when you're missing a term, you got to fill in for it. Now sometimes it could be one term, sometimes it could be two. That's the thing you got to pay attention to. So I see kids every year, they skip over this and then get it wrong because they're not constantly looking for missing terms. And then once you fill in the missing terms, the process is the same. So we start a term back. What times a gives you a cubed? What times a gives you a cubed? It's going to be a squared. So a squared times a is a cubed. A squared times negative 2 is a negative 2a squared. And then it's the same thing where when you subtract minus, that changes into a plus. The a cubes drop out. 0a squared plus 2a squared is 2a squared. And then we bring down the 8a. Then what times a gives you 2a squared? What times a gives you 2a squared? Well, positive 2a. So a 2a times a is 2a squared. Again, you want to think of it to match up. A 2a times a negative 2 is a negative 4a. And then we do our subtraction, and remember that's going to change the signs on both of them. And you want that first term to cancel out. And then 8a plus 4a is going to give me 12a. And then we got to bring down that negative 24. And then what times a gives you 12a? What times a gives you 12a? Well, that's going to be a positive 12. So 12 times a is 12a. 12 times a negative 2 is a negative 24. And then when we subtract, okay, 12a's go, 24's go, and you end up with 0. So again, when you get 0 there, that's telling you you have no remainder. Oops. Okay. And I know this video is a little bit long, and I promise I wouldn't try to do it, but we're going to do one more because I think you guys need to see this a little bit more anyways because it's not the same. All right. So last one here. We got x cubed minus 14x squared plus 100 being divided by the quantity of x minus 5. So again, before you start off, you want to double check. 3, 2, I'm missing the x. So on this one, I'm missing x to the first. So when I go to write my problem, I have to account for that. So I have my x minus 5 out here divided by x cubed minus 14x squared plus 0x and then plus 100. So I would say in terms of long division, calculation mistakes and missing terms are the #1 mistake. All right, so start term back. What times x gives you x cubed? What times x gives you x cubed? X squared, so x squared times x gives you x cubed. X squared times a -5 gives you a -5x squared. And then we have to subtract. So a minus and a plus. And if you make the mistake in this part of the problem, then it definitely throws off the rest. So you got -14x squared plus 5x squared, which is going to give you a -9x squared. And then we got to bring down the 0x. Okay, so what times x gives you a -9x squared? What times x gives you a -9x squared? A -9x. So -9x times x gives you a -9x squared. A -9x times a -5 gives you a +45x. And then you have to remember to change it. Okay. So these are going to drop. 0 minus 45x is going to give you a -45x. And then we bring down the 100. Then what times x gives you a -45x? What times x gives you a -45x? Well, a -45. So -45 times x gives you a -45x. A -45 times 5 is going to give you a +225. Then you guys subtract. So that's going to be a plus, and this is going to be a minus. So the 45x's go. 100 minus 225 is going to give me a -125. So we definitely got a remainder. Okay, so we got to figure that into our answer. So your final answer is going to be x squared minus 9x minus 45 minus 125 over x minus 5. Okay, so if you're still struggling a little bit with it, I'm planning on doing a day 3. And again, you know, rewatch videos, shoot me an email or ask me in Zoom, go online, look at some other videos.